Welcome to this episode of the Conscious Business Coffee Break, where we take a few moments to explore what's happening in the conscious business movement, expand awareness, and support your efforts in conscious business. Greetings, everyone. I'm Stephen Donaco of the Conscious Business Enterprise, a division of humanities team. And on today's program, we're talking about embracing generational inclusion in the workplace. And the article that inspired today's message is from the B Corporation. And they have a publication on Medium. And BeTheChange.com is the site. And the headline was Time to Start Working With, Not Against Millennials. And essentially, the summary is that tech-savvy workers will soon make up half of the U.S. workforce. And the article talks about the millennial generation, basically defining that generation as people born between the early 1980s and through the 2000s. And last year, the Pew Research Center declared that the number of millennials had now officially overtaken the previous dominant generation, which were the baby boomers, representing 75.4 million people in the U.S. population. So, like with any maturing generation throughout history, I mean, this is just natural. This generation is an essential and irrevocable part of our future. So millennials, as the maturing generation, will be the generation that determines and is involved and fosters and stewards the continued evolution of humanity. So not only will millennials make up the largest share of our workforce, they will also shape consumption behavior, and in some contexts, the article says that they will represent the most passionate investors, and that's a real shift because passionate investors in this context has a lot more to do with conscious business than simply opportunism and making money. So some common perceptions about the millennial generation is that, well, before I even go there, let me just say that my generation, which is Generation X, a lot of the things I'm going to tell you about common perceptions with millennials were projected on my generation and generations before it. The baby boomers had these projections placed upon it as well. So this is just history repeating itself in that sense. So some common perceptions about the millennials is that one, this is according to the article, that one, they don't know how to socialize because they're always on their phones. Well, my generation, which was Generation X, as I mentioned, we were accused of watching too much television and not getting outside enough to play. So it's just, different media, different medium. But for older millennials, those who were born more in the 80s, technology tended to be what the article called a later stage lifestyle disruption. And then for the younger millennials, technology's been around since the beginning. They've always had access to it. And it's not just used as a tool to connect, but to make meaningful change. And I say this is an important distinction because for some of the millennials, and particularly those who are very active, as we've seen in the media, particularly in the United States, in response to like a lot of the gun violence in schools, millennials are doing productive work with technology. So if they're always on their phones, well, one part of that's socializing, but another part of that is working. Another part of that is activism, the connection with one another and with the world, and publishing. Technology is used increasingly and hugely by this generation for publishing and getting views out. The other perception, according to the article, is that they don't know how to handle their money. And the way that money has been handled by humanity and society has changed as well. So the Great Recession deeply changed perceptions around so many economic quote-unquote assurances. And the financial or the economic wisdom, quote-unquote, passed down through generations about the safe and thoughtful ways to build financial independence has been debunked for many middle-class U.S. families, particularly in the United States. So millennials had been witness to seeing their family members lose their lifelong savings and their homes after heeding bad financial advice from, frankly, people who were unethical, irresponsible, and opportunistic. Uh, we could say, are rightly skeptical of just blanket wisdom to put your money in a 401k or just to go to college to protect yourself or to buy a home for financial security, because they've seen these things all become a house of cards in the last generation. The other perception is that millennials are entitled. Well, like I said, both my generation, Gen X, and baby boomers were accused of the same thing, of being entitled. So this is sort of like Back to the Future type thinking. Millennials are the first generation that is contending with a shift in reality from income generation, from a knowledge-based economy. And this whole idea of per-hour labor is really antiquated. I mean, most of the workforce is not on the assembly line anymore. Most of the workforce doesn't punch a clock. So the paradigm is different. So the ways that money is made and quantified and the way that time is considered in the making of money is different. And we are getting over this assembly line thinking because it is indeed antiquated. Knowledge-based workers, especially those in the millennial generation, the bulk of them, are expected to use analytical skills, strategic problem solving, and team-based approaches for the tasks at hand. And it's not to say that previous generations didn't, but this becomes all the more needed, acute, and are really essential skills more than ever. And there's also a shift in perceived job satisfaction. So for many millennials, it means seeking out workplaces and careers where there's a free flow of information, there's strong connectivity to supervisors and managers, and actually there's a blurring of boundaries between what we might call frontline workers and supervisors and managers. There's a more holacratic approach to work, and there's a lot more immediate feedback, and things don't have to go through a dozen channels to get communicated. So millennials work differently because work is different and the world is different. Millennials are and will be more conscious consumers and more conscious business people. So this is the, in my estimation, the great hope and the potential for the conscious business movement is that this generation is really embodying a conscious business way of being truly. So my generation and generations before who are working in this realm of conscious business, we are often having to wake up to it, where it's not inherent like it is and it has become for the millennial generation. And you know, the data bears this out. The research bears this out. The anecdotal evidence bears this out, because millennial consumers are more likely to pay for socially responsible products, pursue impact-oriented careers, and use their voice to really call corporate offenders on the carpet. They are more likely to purchase products that have a social and or environmental benefit. They're more likely to tell their friends and family about corporate social responsibility efforts. And they're more likely to voice their opinions to a company about its corporate social responsibility efforts. And then they're also more likely to volunteer for causes supported by companies that they trust. So appreciate the comments that are coming in. Somebody mentioned in the video, Nikki says that I left my corporate job in 2008, and one of the reasons was the business was trying to make the new younger hires fit into an old learning model, at the same time saying we were progressive in learning. So indeed, yeah, this is the previous generations and our waking up in conscious business really need to come to realize and to embrace and not fear that the coming generations are innovating the way of work and humanity in ways that it behooves us to really accept, understand, embrace, and work with. So again, this title of this article is a time to start working with and not against millennials. And I would say, we need to even look at them more globally from the standpoint of that generationally, we all need to work together. So this is not about, this is not just about accepting millennials, but it's also about millennial generations understanding, being mindful of, and taking forward the good wisdom from previous generations and bringing that forward. Because otherwise we get stuck in this us against them dynamic that has not served humanity. And if we look at integral theory and the work of Ken Wilber, the evolved process of a evolving humanity, the enlightened process of an evolving humanity is to include what's come before and then transcend. And this means including what has merit, including what is filled with wisdom, including that which is beneficial, and then transcending it with new thinking, innovative thinking, and new paradigms. So the way I look at it, this whole concept of generational cooperation, it's really the bookends of the Conscious Business Declaration, Principles 1 and 7. Principle 1, meaning that we are one with humanity in all of life. Business and all institutions of the human community are integral parts of a single reality, interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent. And then the last principle, Principle 7 of the Conscious Business Declaration, when aligned with oneness, business is the most powerful engine on earth for creating prosperity and flourishing for all. And if we are to create prosperity and flourishing for all, we need to work intergenerationally. And it's not about exalting one over the other. It's not about making one right and one wrong. It truly is in the spirit of oneness about working together, because that's the only way that we on Earth, as Earthlings, as human beings, as humanity, are going to prosper and flourish as a human race. So with that, I appreciate everyone tuning in today. Thank you for your comments. I will put a link to this article in the comments to the video, and then we'll see you again on Wednesday next week, 9 a.m. U.S. Central Time, for another edition of the Conscious Business Coffee Break. Have a great weekend, everyone.